Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. B, your Creole Connection, coming to you on a very overcast summer day in South Louisiana. It's 94 degrees out. It feels like it's about a 98 given the relative humidity. But it's very overcast, and so the sun is peeking out between cloud cover. Today we are headed toward the river town of Vacherie and the Old River Road. We're in for a special treat this morning. We're going to be visiting an antebellum plantation mansion, only recently added as an attraction to the plantation lineup that characterizes that stretch of river between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And if my intel is correct, Felicity Plantation has only been offering tours since the beginning of 2022. So as I said, it's relatively new. I've never seen it, nor have I even viewed it from the curb. It's a historic sugarcane plantation. It's the sister plantation to St. Joseph and was built around 1846. It was built by a man by the name of Valcourt Emma as a wedding gift to his daughter Felicity and her spouse, who happened to also be her cousin. It was acquired by a bank in 1873 and then purchased by the Waggisback family back in 1890, and it's been in that family ever since. It has elements of French Colonial stylings and Anglo-American styles, the kind of stylings you see around St. Francisville up in northern Louisiana, which are characterized by wide hallways and high ceilings. And several of the rooms actually contain red Italian marble mantelpieces, and so that's going to be interesting to see. Now, it was greatly damaged by Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, but has since been restored. And the grounds, from what I understand, still contain a barn and some slave quarter houses. Lots of filming was done there. Things like 12 Years a Slave and The Skeleton Key, and I think it's a WGN series called Underground. So I'm sure you're going to see quite a bit of modifications that were done by the filming crews over the years. So that's where we headed. Let's see what it looks like. So we just pulled up and parked, and now I'm standing out in front of the property and speaking to the tour guide. So let's go ahead on and pick up this tour in progress. What style is this?
This is a mixture of a little Creole, especially the construction.
Yes.
Small amounts of Greek revival, but a strong Anglo or English influence.
Right.
So, Joseph Waggisback bought St. Joe 1877. His son bought this 1899. But let's go back to the very beginning. The home construction began on this home in 1843. Installed to help keep the upper porches from rotting. Today those porches are sealed, so these are no longer functional. But early on, the rain would have dripped down through these to keep those porches from rotting. Sometimes people say, why in the world did they let a movie company stain them? It's all about money.
Of course.
Now, the house is a work in progress. We need a little more furniture. I sort of like it, not with furniture, because, of course, the Civil War ended, slavery ended, the entire plantation system collapsed. Over 1920. The gardens have not been tended or cultivated, even though they're remarkable ruins. They've not been tended or cultivated until very recently. The lady who bought that garden years ago, probably in those carts would go up and down the river on both sides of the river, distributing those goods to the poor people. That to me says the slaves, but it also says the poor white people who also lived and worked on the plantations. Valcaram was a patron of Saint. People from all over the world came here. The Waggasback era began, and in many places after the Civil War, people nearly starved to death. That didn't happen here. It could possibly have been the office for Felicity. As mistress of the home, she would have been in charge of the staircase is original. Family has toyed with the idea of taking this up, and they're afraid they're opening a can of worms. So Stanislaus, or Stan, married a lady named Edme Birch. And Edme Birch didn't like the floors, so she had this put in. But this was actually their bedroom. Edme, like I said, I'll tell you one thing, I was so happy when I was old enough, Margie Waggasback Schmidt, who was one of Stan and Edme's daughters. So she put together this delightful little pamphlet. And one of her little stories was about how when one of the older siblings got married, it was, I'm assuming you know about the Batcher?
Yes, the Batcher, yeah.
This family has 8/10 of a mile of Batcher. That's a lot of Batcher. And that Batcher brings in over 200,000 you can see between here and says they did that. I said, how did they punish you? What did they say? He said, no one ever said a single word to me about that. Get up and take the rolling pin and smooth it. Poor people, of course, had Spanish moss.
Yes.
And they just shook it out, hoping to get rid of the book. And I'm like, where in the world would you get something to match so beautifully? These were purchased from up in somewhere in Missouri.
That was fantastic. I had a tour all by myself, and I was able to tour this newly opened plantation house, Felicity, opened only since January of this year. So I'm not going to go too close to these properties because they are these slave quarters are damaged as a result of the storm, and so they're basically off limits. But I wanted to at least take a couple of shots of them from this distance. Now this right here is not a slave quarter. This was the kitchen here, and they are still in the process of restoring that, as you can see here. And this tree, this massive oak tree, was severely damaged and thinned out over the course of the storm, but it's starting to fill back in a little bit, and hopefully in a couple more years it's going to have the density that it had before Hurricane Ida. And these slave cabins were moved around, just willy-nilly, moved around to wherever they deemed they wanted them to be at a particular time. So where you see them situated now is not necessarily where they were built and established. They were built and then just picked up and moved around. And sundry other buildings, wells and barns and such, as you can tell here. You talk about the redwoods of California. While these certainly don't compare to that, they are nonetheless entirely massive. And sugarcane all around. I mean all around sugarcane. So here's a shot of the house from the what is that? This is going to be the south side. And moving to the front. Now, as I mentioned to the tour guide, there is no canopy of oak trees creating that majestic walkway that we see at Laura Plantation and Homer's House and oak alley. These trees seem to be in some disarray. And when I asked the tour guide, she said that, they started to do that with these two, but then that's about as far as they went. And again, here is the facade of the house with the dormers. And this is just a pan of the property. 1,100 acres here. Mostly working day sugarcane farm, mostly. I've shown pictures of Laura Valley with all of its damage, but these slave quarters and cabins and storage facilities just could not withstand the winds of Ida, and it's clear here. It's going to take some effort to restore these properties because it's expensive to do this work, because it's not as much as restoring as it is an artistic endeavor, because you want to maintain the authenticity of these properties, and therein lies some of the challenge. There we have it. So here we are leaving Felicity Plantation. It is on the Old River Road as a big storm brewing, and so we're going to head on out and get on back up the road before the sky opens up. Let me stop here and just take one more picture. And there you can see, and a beautiful, beautiful home. I'm so glad that it's reopened. And again, I have to put a disclaimer here. I'm in no way blinded by its beauty and not cognizant of the tragedy and the horror of human slavery. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about that. We just appreciate what's before us in terms of the architecture and in terms of the surrounding properties. And as you can see, this property isn't particularly beautiful with gardens or anything. And it seems like it never was. It just a straight shot from the levee all the way to the property. And in reality, this house was owned by one of the wealthiest families on the river, but perhaps there was just not someone who had an affinity for gardens and all things horticulture. So what we have is pretty plain, but the house itself is spectacular. So here we are leaving Felicity Plantation. And as I drive down this rocky road, I can't help but compare this little path to some of the neighboring plantations with their flagstone driveways and their herringbone pattern paths. And here we on this little rocky path going out of the gate. But that's good. We like variety. Variety is the spice of life. Now, since we got a late start, we're probably going to skip out on stopping at one of the local restaurants and seeing what's on the menu and ordering up some delicious, I'm sure, local food. We're just going to head on back because we're seeing some bad weather starting to develop in the south, and I don't want to be caught out here today trying to navigate bad weather, so we're just going to head on back to the home base. But I must say, this whole trip has been an extreme treat. And we were able to take a tour of Felicity Plantation with no other patrons there. So I had the run of the place to myself, and I was able to ask all kind of probing questions to the very knowledgeable tour guide, and just stunning. Some of the history that I was able to glean, and some of the inside architecture that I was able to appreciate. So how can we summarize Felicity Plantation? I would think that it's, in a word, stark. Not much at all as it pertains to the gardens, but the house itself is pretty majestic. It's restored and stabilized because the foundation was starting to fail. But they have done extensive work there, and now it looks like it can stand for another 200 years. It is on the Old River Road, and it just opened back this year. I think it's a must-see attraction. So if you find yourself on the Old River Road, viewing some of the other more popular attractions, Laura, Whitney, O'Galley, and so forth, then you might want to put that on your itinerary as well, because Felicity is something that I think I would bring someone who has an interest in seeing authenticity in terms of the grounds and a stunning mansion. They would be not at all disappointed. So that's it for today. This is Dr. B. I am your Creole Connection, and we'll catch you in the next video.